Let's make it simple. Government controls means uniformity, regulation, fees, inspection, and of course, compliance. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. We meet you once again right here from Stein Studios in Ratmalana. This is Face the Nation, as I said before. Tonight, our topic of discussion is Sri Lanka under emergency regulations. Is it a viable alternative? To discuss all this and more, we've invited 4 guests to our studios this evening as well. Let me quickly introduce them to you. Joining us this evening on Face the Nation are Tushan Gunawardana, Executive Director, Consumer Affairs Authority, Mr. U.R. De Silva, President's Counsel, Attorney at Law Bhavani Fonseca, Senior Researcher, Center for Policy Alternatives, Dr. Yasantha Madura Peruma, Senior Lecturer, Department of Business Economics, University of Colombo. Let's start off tonight's show with Mr. U.R. De Silva, President's Counsel. Mr. De Silva, what is with these emergency regulations being imposed in Sri Lanka? Are we in a state of emergency at the moment in terms of food security in the country? Your time starts now.
Yeah. Now, before that, we have to inform the listener or the people who are watching this that the government has done their best to curtail or to ask the merchants to give necessary food items to the people during this COVID problematic area, time. So they have gone into various acts, including this Consumer Protection Act, and then there is another act, Consumer Authority Act. So those 2 acts were there in this country, and then they try their best to have negotiation with them. Unfortunately, those people who have imported those items, they never adhere to those requests, and then the only remedy would be then thereafter the Public Security Act. The Public Security Act is also, we can't say that it's a thing that this particular government implemented it. So this is coming from 1959. It was brought to this country in 1947, and then it was used in 1959 by late S.W.R.D. Bandanayake, who objected earlier, but he used this 1959. So thereafter, it was there right through in this country, and various occasions it was used. And now the president has no alternative but to use that to what? To get all these things into the government custody and distribute among the people. That is the very reason. That is why now he has, according to this particular act, he has the power, when he thinks that it is essential to have these emergency regulations, he has 2 options. One is to have that as a precautionary measure for the safeguard of this country as far as the security is concerned. So if there's if there are riots or if there any war situation in this country, so he has the power to have them. We have that experience in this country in various occasions. But there is another area where he has the power. If there is an important area where he should distribute the essentials to the people, then he can act upon that and thereafter go ahead. So that is the very reason he has issued 2243/1 Gazette notification.
So, Mr. De Silva, right now we are quite well aware that the Commissioner General, in terms of exercising his franchise over these food regulations that have come into play, or the emergency regulations that have come into play, is a military personnel. Is that clear?
Yes.
Are we all on the same page, Mr. De Silva? Right. So, okay. If so, do you recollect, Mr. De Silva, several months ago when there was a meeting at Temple Trees under the patronage of the Prime Minister, Mahinda Rajapaksa, a military personnel said in front of the media and also those who were present that we know exactly where the rice stocks are there. We will go and seize them if necessary.
Yes.
So what happened then?
Now, you must understand the law in this country. According to them, they can seize those things, and they have filed number of cases. I don't know whether you were listening to debate in today's debate in
I was listening to you.
Mr. Alagewan,
Yeah.
MP, Minister Alagewan, he has quite categorically stated what they did. They have filed number of cases in Colombo magistrate, Colombo municipality, Malika Kanda courthouse, but unfortunately they can't proceed with that. There are numerous reasons for it. Because of the COVID situation, court cannot entertain those applications till October. They can't do anything.
Mr. De Silva,
So are you going to say?
I'm surprised to hear what you're saying, because you are also an advisor to the Ministry of Justice,
So
and you are saying that the law should not take its due course.
No, that is not.
That's what you said.
No, that is not the correct way. The correct way, they have filed the cases, but how can they act because the COVID situation is there? The court cannot entertain those applications and issue summons because the court is not entertaining people. So you have to call the suspects and then ask whether you are guilty or not. If they plead guilty, then the court can consider to confiscate or not. Those things are there, but this is not the occasion. So we can't wait till October, or sometime they might go to higher court. So it will take some time to get the benefit. So because of that, this is the quickest one, and this is the deep situation where they should adhere to this particular emergency regulation, because they can appoint a particular person. Already they have appointed it, and then thereafter he will go with their other people, with their subordinates, and then thereafter they take over, and thereafter they distribute. It is the correct way of doing.
Do you think,
emergency
Mr. De Silva, that right now in Sri Lanka we are in a food crisis?
No, there is no such food crisis.
Then why was this emergency regulation came into play?
That is why the government has decided to immediately act on that, because if we are going to wait till the court cases are concluded, it will take long time. It is not the delay, because of the delay of the present situation, and then because of those sections are there, then you have to act according to that.
So now this has been limited, Mr. De Silva, to 3 products, that is sugar, paddy and rice.
That's right. So those
now,
are
when there was a milk powder crisis in Sri Lanka, there was no such regulation.
No,
when there was an issue with regard to dal in Sri Lanka, there was no emergency regulation. But suddenly, with regard to the whim and fancy of the government, they implement laws and regulations based on how they want to proceed in the future.
They found
that is not a democracy.
Available in stocks, and they were keeping those things, and they were not distributing. They were not bringing to the people. That is the very reason they use this thing. Otherwise, for the other things, of course, they have to give permission to bring those things, import those food items. But here, of course, those food items were available in Sri Lanka. So that is why they have taken this action, and this is for limited purpose, and this is not the whole emergency regulations had not been used, and this is for limited, and they have categorically stated we are using to give more things to the people.
So the laws in Sri Lanka at the moment, are not sufficient. Let's look at the Essential Public Services Act number 61 of 1979, Consumer Affairs Authority Act of 2003, the Disaster Management Act, which was implemented after the tsunami in 2004, number 13 of 2005. All these acts are irrelevant.
Not irrelevant. If we are going to use those acts, we can't get immediate results. That's why I'm telling you. So please understand that according to law.
Yeah, but Mr. Disha, the problem is every single time there is an issue in the country, the government or the president appoints military personnel to run the country.
Sorry?
Whenever there is an issue in the country, the government or the president appoints a presidential task force headed by a military officer.
That's right.
Now, that is not fair, Mr. De Silva.
How can you say merely because the military officer is heading a particular place, how can you say it is not reasonable or it is not good? If he is doing wrong thing, of course you can point out. I also say it is wrong. If he is doing a correct service, and then if he is doing it properly, if he do it immediately, expeditiously, then of course we can say he is doing a proper job. That is why the President has the power to decide. You and I can't say that President, please appoint this person. No, he has the power to use it, and he has the power to appoint a person. If he is satisfied that person, he can use that person.
What is shocking, Mr. De Silva, is since 2019, after this president was elected, there has been so many years, and the president couldn't arrest the situation with regard to the rice crisis in the country, no, Mr. De Silva? Sad story.
You can't say like that.
No, I'm asking you, sad story now. Since 2019, the president has been appointing his own cabinet.
Yeah.
The president has been in power, and for 2.5 years, the president has been unable to run the country.
No, not you can't say unable. Now,
Every single time there is a problem, there is a presidential task force.
That is what I am telling you, because he asked the government.
Where is the administration in the country? Where is the governance in the country? Where is democracy in the country? All these things are there.
It is there. Don't worry about the democracy. It is there. But unfortunately, the government servants, they are not properly doing their job. Most of the people.
Government servants are not doing their job properly.
Government servants.
Government
they
servants.
Are not all, most of the people, they tried. The president has tried his best to give the necessary orders, but they are not adhering to his orders. That is why he is going to do this type of thing, and he will do for the benefit of the people, not for any other people.
Thank you very much, Mr. De Silva, President's Council. I now move attention to Dr. Yasantha Madura Peruma, Senior Lecturer, Department of Business Economics, University of Colombo. Government servants are not doing their job properly, and that is why the president. No, that is what you said.
Not all.
Not all. Some, at least some. A majority. Can I say majority?
Yes,
yeah, a majority, as according to Mr. De Silva, are not doing their job. As a result of that, the government has to appoint a presidential task force headed by a military officer and impose emergency regulations in Sri Lanka. Is this fair in the eyes of an economist?
You know that we have to see first whether the action has been taken by the existing authorities are proper enough to address the issues we are facing by now. I also agree to a certain extent that government officers, I would call them as the politicized government officers. There are. At the same time, I would totally agree there are brave people who want to do something, they are doing their level best. So, at the same time, so therefore, I think that there may be reason to appoint that, but as a general person, ordinary person, I made this statement not as the economist.
Right. So Dr. Yasantha, now interestingly, right now there is emergency regulation that has come into play. Now there are ample laws in Sri Lanka based on what Opposition Leader Sajid Premadasa has that the country is governed and administered during difficult times. Is it fair to bring in such emergency regulations to further tighten the government structure, the government mechanism, and also make sure that the country is driven in an autocratic pathway?
No, actually, this is also, out of my purview.
As a layman, as an economist, what do you think? Because we've seen such incidents. I can just go back to history, Dr. Yasantha. We saw the manner in which Germans, when the Second World War was happening, Adolf Hitler urged and pushed individuals to start farming in their farmlands in Germany to make sure that they feed the massive number of German soldiers. And as a result of that, there was a lot of issues that cropped up in the military ranks in those countries as well. Now, this was during World War II. I'm talking about. Are we heading towards that autocratic leadership style governance in Sri Lanka now?
If the government officials fail, general public also would believe that they are the people who are capable enough to do this job. So that would be the situation. I don't know the understanding of the general public. Now with regard to the decision taken by the government, I am not specialist in the field of law, but I would say that if the government say that we are going to confiscate, it will reflect the bad thing on the on the international investments. It's give the bad signal. But anyway, they are not going to confiscate, take over things and sell. In that sense, I feel it's fair enough, but we have to consider again whether these people are making the profit from the government gave the tax concessions, at the same time that they imported large amount of stock. Then again they are saying that the exchange rate depreciation, the Sri Lankan rupee depreciation would be the reason for increasing the price.
No, but what is the mechanism, Dr. Asantha, that the Commission of Essential Services is going to adopt when taking over these stocks which are held by traders and retailers and regulate the prices? What is the mechanism?
Okay. Now, I will start in this way. One of my friend who is working for the Ministry of Health as a physician or the health doctor, he was telling that we had to adhere to the fundamental of the health, that is washing hands. The economists also have to use not some complicated mechanism, but simple tools to distribute the goods and services where the shortage has emerged. Actually, now if you take the vaccination, it is also rationing. It operates in England, all over the world, it's a rationing, but nobody is questioning about that. It's also adopted. But the issue is, in Sri Lankan context, we are not prioritizing. It's a mechanism issue, right? So the government official may be doing wrong things, so that's why the government want to employ maybe the army officials to streamline the mechanism of distribution.
But what is the price? Who decides on the price? Is it the government or the Commission of Essential Services?
Under this situation, now again, I feel that the decision or decision made by the government to impose the price ceiling may not be practical. Why? In the market, samba rice, 1 kilo was 150, and small mill owners, they were selling 135. Now they have bring down the price to 100, nearly 100, right? I am not talking about the kiri samba, normal samba. Then you see there is a big price gap.
So that is what I am asking. Who is going to compensate to this particular gap in question?
The question is not clear.
No, who is going to compensate to this difference in prices? Now you said 100 rupees or 135 rupees. This 35 rupee gap, who is going to fill that? Is the government going to pay that?
Now according to the situation, the people or the general public have to pay it.
Right. Thanks a lot, Dr. Asantha. We'll get back to you momentarily after the first round is completed. I now move to Attorney at Law Bhavani Fonseca, Senior Researcher, Center for Policy Alternatives. Bhavani, when we are talking about these emergency regulations, we know that the Public Security Ordinance empowers the President to declare a state of emergency on two grounds. One is in the interest of public security and the preservation of public order, or the second point is for the maintenance of supplies and services essential to the life of the community. So what the government has done with regard to bringing forth an emergency regulation right now is not wrong.
Well, I think it's very important to look at what has happened this week, last week. The President issued a declaration on the 30th under the PSO, the Public Security Ordinance, which brought in a state of emergency. Now, the President has this power. We have seen this over the years, we've seen this over the decades. Various governments have resorted to that. So that's provided in the law in terms of an exceptional situation. And there are two ambits that you mentioned where you can bring in emergency. Now, what was brought in on Monday, the 30th, raises questions as to what is this exceptional situation. If you look at the regulation, it specifically talks about a supply issue. Now, yes, the government's messaging in the last few days as well as today in the parliamentary debate is there's no shortage, it's a distribution issue. But if you start looking and asking questions, do you need emergency to sort out that problem? And the question we have posed is, when you have a spate of laws, you have the Consumer Affairs Authority Act, on the supplies and the services sector, you have the Public Security Ordinance Section 17, you don't need to bring emergency for that, as well as other laws. Do you need emergency? Now, there can be a debate. I think there are lots of people who say, yes, we need emergency. My position is, I don't think you need emergency at this moment, considering the fact we have existing actors, we have laws. We
No, but
also,
the point is how you define exceptional circumstances. Right now, month-on-month inflation stood at 5.7% in July. Now, August, 6%. US dollar rate, exchange rates are skyrocketing. You can't even imagine to trade right now in Sri Lanka, given the fact that the Sri Lankan rupee is depreciating so drastically. And we are an import-based economy. So we need the US dollars to retain the country. So it's about defining exceptional circumstances. In the government's point of view, they may say that we are in an exceptional circumstances situation, and that is why we implemented such laws. And that is a fair argument to buy, isn't it?
I think it's a fair argument if you look at all the issues. So we come back to the point of who decides, what's the threshold. Now, in terms of the PSO, it's one individual who makes the decision. It's the president. Now, you can say, yes, the president, considering all of these issues, have made that decision. But my question is, when you have so many actors, and since March 2020, we have had also several task forces. So this is not just one individual, we have a spate of institutions, entities appointed by the president to look at various issues as a result of the pandemic. And one particular task force is looking at services to the people.
So Bhavani,
the question is, you have had one task force specifically on that issue, which is meant to have addressed these issues, and suddenly you say there is an exceptional situation. So are you saying all the entities that have been appointed since last year by the executive president have failed? Is that the question? If they have failed, are the steps now being taken by the executive president, appointing a commissioner general of essentials, is that the best way to do it? Because the past track record raises questions of these entities not delivering.
So, Bhavani, I want to equip the conclusion aspect of this particular report that was released by the Center for Policy Alternatives, which says, initial comment, the declaration of a state of emergency and regulations for the maintenance of essential supplies and services. The conclusion says, the CPA also reiterates the point that emergency regulations must be recognized as a temporary conferral of extraordinary power for the government during times of acute crisis. It should not be considered as a substitute for the normal legal regime. As such, the state of emergency should be enforced only for a limited period of time. Now, y'all are not opposing these regulations in question. Y'all are saying, correct me if I'm wrong, in the event such a regulation has been brought forward, now we know that it's been enacted into law today in Parliament with 132 votes in favor, y'all don't oppose it. You all say certain regulations need to be brought forward to ensure that the proper legal system is in place. Am I?
So let me explain.
Am I okay?
Now,
Can I say that?
all the document is saying is, you have to use the legal regime. Sri Lanka has a constitution, we have laws, we have structures. Emergency is an exceptional
So
situation.
the public security ordinance is also part of that law.
It's a law, exactly. So the public security ordinance also has several other sections that also provide for certain powers that can be used now. You don't need emergency per se. So our point is, you have existing laws, use those. Now the government, I think one minister today has said, they're bringing in new amendments. Fine, bring in new amendments, bring in a new law. This has been something that has been discussed since last year. The quarantine ordinance is insufficient to address the emergency of a pandemic at this present moment. Bring in new laws. The government actually has been very efficient in bringing laws, including a constitutional amendment in 2020, the Port City Bill in 2021. So there was no bar in bringing laws on other areas. So why are you resorting to the emergency regulations when you have a lawmaking process where the parliament is involved?
But
so it's
based
not
on
just
what
the
Mr. Disilo
executive.
said, that process takes time. And we are not in a position right now to waste time. Time is of essence.
Exactly, Shamir, but this is the point. We have been in a pandemic since last year, March. Why are we
what you're trying
having
to say
this
is, given
sudden
the fact-
conversation now?
What you're trying to say is, given the fact the government's track record has been so bad, such a regulation won't be prudent in a situation of this sort.
My point is, the track record is so bad, we have had so many entities established, including task forces. Why is this Commissioner General for Essential Services going to be the answer for all those problems?
Right. Thank you very much, Bhavani Fonseca, Senior Researcher, Center for Policy Alternatives. Bhavani Fonseca is also an attorney at law. I now move my attention to Tushan Gunawardhanam, Executive Director of the Consumer Affairs Authority. First of all, Tushan, before we start the show, are you still having the job after last week's
I am.
show, or still are you retired or executive director of the Center for the Consumer Affairs
Still
Authority?
betting on.
Still betting on. Very good. I'm glad at least the government has retained you thus far, and you are sitting here today in your official capacity as Executive Director of the Consumer Affairs Authority. Tushan, who reigns supreme at the moment given the emergency regulations? Is it the Commissioner of Essential Services who has been appointed by the President, who's handling the show, or is it the Consumer Affairs Authority handling the show still?
It is the Essential Services Commissioner General, because he has more power. Our act actually specifically states that we can't seize goods and distribute. So we have a limitation there. We have
So you all can only seize.
We can seal it, we can seal off the place, and then we have to go to court.
So what
The
happened?
courts are closed. So as of now, if there is an emergency, I think these are unprecedented times.
Yeah. So
So-
since the 31st of August, we know that a commissioner was appointed by the President. You all have been seizing pockets of.
We don't seize.
You all have not been seizing it.
We don't. We go behind.
So who
people
has been seizing these sugar
We don't
stocks?
seize. We go and check if they have hoarded sugar. We go and file a case. But
No,
what
but we
happens
saw.
is,
But I saw in visual media very clearly they're seizing those.
no, that
areas.
is, I think that is misrepresented. We
That's a
go
political
seal off the
gimmick.
place and we file
Is
a
that a
case.
political gimmick?
That is up
Because in the eyes
to-
of the
up to
public,
the
they think
person
that the
who-
government has taken action to seize these stocks, but that has not taken place because this came into law only today.
I think you're wrong. It's not seizing. We go and seal off the place,
Okay, seal off the place.
and then we have to go to court.
Right.
So
how
the
many
court
stocks?
process takes time.
Right. So how much of stocks have you all sealed based on what you're saying during
Very
the last
recently,
few days?
you're referring to sugar, right?
Yeah,
So
sugar.
we have seized about 28,000 tons, which is approximately 16 to 17 days of consumption.
16 to 17 days of consumption, 28,000 stocks of sugar.
28,000 metric tons.
So 28,000 metric tons of sugar, which is only enough given Sri Lanka's consumption 16 to 17 days. So what is the role of the commissioner now? Will he find more sugar stocks?
These were what we got. Certain people actually gave tips, and we raided these locations. So we found the sugar. So the Commissioner General has the power to seize the stock, distribute it through Satosa. So that's the method that they adopt.
Right. Tushan, who decides on the price of these food items that would be seized in the next few days by the military?
Military, no.
No, it's anyway, it's going
No,
to be
he's a retired military officer, right? So he's a civilian now.
He's a civilian now, but at the end of the day, who will seal it?
I don't think it's fair to say that he's a military guy. He's a civilian now.
Right, okay. So when these stocks of sugar, of rice or paddy is sealed in the next few days, who is going to decide on the maximum retail price of these items?
Essential Services Commissioner General will decide.
What is the role of the Consumer Affairs Authority in this equation now?
Consumer Affairs Authority does certain functions, like we share information, we share the databases that we have. We got the importers to register the warehouses. So we have all the information. So we are working together. But it is the Commissioner General who will decide to distribute. We can't seize and distribute.
So now your minister, now your minister, State Minister Lanka today in Parliament said that from Friday onwards there won't be any shortage of sugar or rice in the market. Is that something that the general public can buy as an argument?
I'm not sure how we got the data, but I'm sure if he said that, he will be able to back up with the facts. I'm quite not sure of the exact amount, but approximately we need about 540,000 metric tons.
How many government servants are attached to the Consumer Affairs Authority?
Close to 550.
Close to 550. Now, based on what Mr. U.R. De Silva said, most of these government servants, or majority of them, as to what Mr. De Silva said, are corrupted.
Not corrupt, they are not doing their best.
They are not doing their job.
Don't come out with that.
So they are not doing their job.
Okay. But we can't say like that.
Right, okay. Not corrupted, but not doing their job.
They are not doing their job properly.
Right, okay.
That's what I am telling you.
Sorry, okay. So, as according to Mr. Silva, they are not doing their job properly. No problem. So, 550 of them are with the Consumer Affairs Authority. The government had to appoint this commissioner or state and emergency regulation in Sri Lanka because of the fact that some government arm was not functioning well. And that is why they had to resort to such an action, because to make sure that the public get the rice, paddy and sugar on time. Is that arm the Consumer Affairs Authority?
I would respectfully disagree with Mr. De Silva on that, but I think it's more or less we are confined to an act. So certain areas of the act, given today's context, especially with COVID-19, we are unable to seize and distribute. So
Tushan, this is a hell of a story, Tushan. Now, when you take a look at the last few weeks,
we don't have the power.
There was a gas crisis in Sri Lanka. There was a milk powder crisis in Sri Lanka. There is a rice crisis in Sri Lanka. There is no canned fish in Sri Lanka. There is so much of problems with the flow of goods that are coming to the country, and the Consumer Affairs Authority is saying, that's not our job.
I'm not saying it's not our job. Let me explain this to you.
Something is wrong.
We have a fundamental problem with the economy.
What is the fundamental fault of the economy?
See, now we are already over-regulating the we call ourselves the free market,
the economy
right?
has been coming since 1977.
Hear me out. We have a free market, right? We call ourselves a free market. We are a democracy, right? And in that, we have now over-regulated this market as of now. We are an open economy out there, but we have socialist systems, we have communist systems, we have. Now, what do we call our economy going forward? We don't know, right? None of us know what we call our economy anymore, because We are certainly not an open economy anymore, right? So we have over-regulated this economy already, and this will get worse. The more we interfere, this is going to get worse. But I also would say that these are unprecedented times. So I think the president had to intervene because the
You're saying that, Tushar, because the president appointed you as executive director.
No, not because of that. See, he's the president of the country. So it is his responsibility to ensure that if there is a problem in the country where distribution is concerned and the Consumer Affairs Authority cannot seize and the court process does not work because of the COVID-19 situation.
Because there is a flaw in the government arm.
No. There is. I agree. You know, the problem is it's like an iceberg. The problem is way down. There is a big problem underneath. We are scratching the surface, right?
Tushar, let's forget about the. Tell me, how many people are manipulating the rice market in Sri Lanka?
I'm telling you, the more we regulate.
How many? Four people are handling.
Because
one of them is the former president's brother. Am I right?
Yes.
Tushar?
Yes.
The other one is also strongman of the SLFP government.
Yes.
Now, who is responsible? Who is in power, Tushar? Who is in power? Is it the UPFA along with the SLFP in power, or is the UNP with the JVP in power? No, tell me that. No, just I'm asking a very simple question. Who is in power? Is it the UPFA along with the SLPP and the SLFP in power, or is it the UNP or the JVP in power?
Let me tell you.
No, very simple question. I'm not. Who is in power?
Currently, it's SLPP.
SLPP along with the SLFP and the Alliance Party is in power.
SLPP is in power, but this is the country we built for the past 40 years. This is our economy. We can't even stay.
No, my point is
close the country for 1 year.
My point is, you scratch my back, I will scratch your back as a result of that. That is the attitude of this government in play.
See,
you have two members of the present regime involved in the rice market in Sri Lanka, and are you trying to tell me that the government can't get them to release the stocks that they have with them?
See, we are an open economy, right? We are a democratic country. It goes against what you're saying again. It contradicts. We can't go and seize other people's stuff. If this argument stands, we shouldn't be doing that, right?
No, but my argument is, Sushant, everyone is getting benefited. The people are facing the brunt of all this nonsense that is been portrayed by respective governments in play. May it be the SLFP, may it be the UNP, may it be the JVP, may it be the SLPP, may it be any other political party in Sri Lanka. They have been putting the people in the hole, isn't it?
Yes, because if you take the current situation, right, we have to understand that about the rice issue, we have 4 big players who obviously will control the market. The paddy marketing board is almost paralyzed, so it's not functioning.
Right. Thank you very much, Tushar Gunawardena. We open the floor for questions from our journalists. On to my immediate right is Chaturang Hapaj, how did I miss his name? And on to my immediate left is Shalan Benedict. Chaturang is also the manager of the English news desk. Shalan is a law student. We will be joined by Azra momentarily as the show goes on. So let's start off with Chaturang.
Thank you, Sham. My first question is to Tushar. Now, we try to understand in this first round of where we stand, like this problem, because a lot of lay people do not understand the fact that we are at this moment under emergency regulations as a country. Comes to your particular institution. Now, Shamir also touched upon this. Now, for the past few months, from the time that we have led up to this particular incident, we have seen a lot of consumer good related problems with regard to the Consumer Affairs Authority. We saw from the start of the gas cylinder, the size of the gas cylinder and the reduction of the gas cylinder issue. My question is simple. Do the businessmen, the people who control this, want the Consumer Affairs Authority to take a back seat in all of this? Is that why we are seeing the Consumer Affairs Authority as a sort of a, they're there but they don't do anything sort of institution, or are you all purposely doing that yourselves? Why is the Consumer Affairs Authority in the back seat when it comes to all of these issues? Or am I right in saying that? Am I wrong in saying you all are in the back seat?
We are not in the back seat. The problem is that we are trying to regulate. Please understand, it's an open economy. The more we regulate, it will fail. So we avoid price caps, we try to avoid regulation, we try to stabilize the market. The natural forces have to take over. So the more we get involved, the more problems that the government will have. So you would have seen the gas crisis, the rice crisis. These are almost, if you take gas, there are two companies, so which means it's a monopoly. Rice, 4 large companies, it's a monopoly. So when there is a monopolistic situation in the market where certain essential goods are being manufactured or distributed, when the Consumer Affairs Authority goes and puts a price cap, that will fail, because the companies can say, look, we are not going to, that is what happened to gas. They stopped distributing gas. So Consumer Affairs Authority has, we can't do anything but allow the price hike to go forward. So same goes to rice. If there is a shortage, then we are blamed again because we have a price cap. So we can't, it's going to be very difficult until the government, this is why I keep saying the economic fundamentals also have to change, because we need to, if we are an open economy, we need to allow others also to be in that business.
What you're saying, Tushan, based on what you're saying right now, it's all well and good for any country that is running right. Now, take Sri Lanka for an example, Tushan. We have to think about an election after 4.5 years. We are having provincial council elections, local government elections, general elections, parliament elections. So then this doesn't apply, Tushan. Very unfortunate situation.
The issue is...
Now you're saying LAF gas had to go out of the market because they did not get the price in question. But how will the government win an election if they don't reduce the prices, if they don't have a marked price?
See, we have to face reality, Shamil. At the end of the day, if the rupee is going down, obviously cost of acquisition will be high.
So based on what you're saying, Tushan, it's very clear. If you ask a question as to who is the what is the best job in the world, the answer is politician. They earn more money than anyone else in the world because of the fact that they try to manipulate everything that is happening in their respective nations.
I didn't get that, sorry.
No. Every single time when you ask a question as to what is the best job in the world, someone might say politician is the best job in the world.
Yes.
And the politician has been able to manipulate respective countries over the years, like third world countries like Sri Lanka, and they have been making money exorbitantly over the years. And the people have to face the brunt, and that is where organizations like the Consumer Affairs Authority have to step in, because you all are the custodians of the general public in the marketplace.
I understand what you're saying. It's our responsibility, but what I'm saying is, if there are 2 gas companies, one gas company says we can't provide at that
price. But then Tushan, the problem arises again. We go back to the main core of this problem is that now these institutions and all of us are doing this to ensure that a system is underway, the system functions. There is a way the country's governance takes place, and you as the Consumer Affairs Authority are one important factor of that mechanism. And now you are saying, yes, the economy is affected world over, globally. And then once the economy is affected, that particular system that you run, the cog that you're maintaining does not work. Is that what you're saying?
I believe that our function is only price caps and price control. No. We look after warranties. We look after quality of the goods, hazardous goods. We check all that. There is a whole lot of things that we get involved. It's not only price caps. I'm specifically saying price caps and regulation, over-regulation in the market
Is a bad.
through consumer affairs will fail eventually.
So, Ms. De Silva, if there is a situation like that, I think Sharon will also touch on this. That is where regulations or laws have to be enacted to ensure that there is no monopoly
That's correct.
in the market.
Yes.
Do we have the necessary regulations in Sri
We
Lanka or
don't
the
have
law?
at the moment. If you go through now, my learned friend is talking about his institution. Now it is from 2003. There were no amendments. So what is the fine they are imposing? They are doing a good job, but only thing is with limited framework.
No, but Lasat Aligiven said that that fine has been increased to 100,000 rupees, Tushar.
Today they are bringing that. And
But that's a mistake. That's too much. The fines should, we've recommended a different fine, but I think the minister has a different view on that.
Right. So now they are bringing the amendment. So we can't haphazardly go and increase that without passing
If
the
you
bill.
don't mind, please just give me a second. What do you mean by you're not in favor, Tushan? I thought Consumer Affairs Authority should be in favor of the fines. If not, they can't.
No, Consumer Affairs Authority, we have fines which are obviously
So increase the fine is a good move.
increasing the fine.
Yes.
Yes, we proposed an increase.
Yeah.
But
So that's good. So
we
the minister's
proposed
done
a fair increase based on the current conditions, but I think
So, but
we have been overruled.
more the fine, merrier it is, isn't it?
Huh?
More the fine, merrier it is. So you can.
No,
make
it
sure
doesn't
that the
work on
situation
ground.
is-
No, how can we go and put 100,000 fine on a small boutique? It doesn't work that way. It'll open up more for corruption,
Corruption.
and
That's right.
we are going to
You can't
lose.
have
So
the-
then, Mr. Disila, what
We
you
are
said
going to
initially is
lose-
right.
Huh?
Then, if that is the case, what you said initially
That's right.
about
We are
the
going to-
corrupted individuals,
I
is
know,
right.
I know that.
We are going to
My
lose our
friend is
revenue with this.
safeguarding his authority, but I am 100% sure once we saw that they tried to raid a place. When they went there, no goods were there because somebody from the authority has given the message to that person. So there are people, not all people, but they are not working. So what is the next remedy when the people are in need of those essential items? Are you telling, my learned friend, the Bhavani told us that there are enough laws. I quite appreciate, but those laws will not give best answer to this problem today we are having. So that is
Because
why.
we've never been in a situation like this ever in Sri Lanka.
That's correct. That is why from 2003
That is who's
there
responsible.
were
The
no
government is
amendments.
responsible.
Sorry?
The government is responsible for that.
Shamir, you
How
have
can
to.
you say this government is all the governments who were running the country are responsible because from 2003 they were not interested in doing that. This is where we are suffering. That is why there is no other alternative.
So are you trying to say that the UNP government, the Yapalne government is also responsible for the food crisis
They are
in Sri Lanka at the moment?
responsible. They allow the people to do whatever they want because there was no such crisis at this point. There was no COVID situation. They were happily running the country. But unfortunately, those amendments were not brought in. Those fines were not increased. So this is the correct way of doing things because these regulations or these enactments are not sufficient for us to go before court because we know very well what will happen. They will file number of cases. The person is going to plead. Lot of big companies, they are not going to plead guilty. They say we are not guilty and we are going for trial. Till such time, goods are there. So what are you talking about? This is what it is essential. We have to distribute these things. That is the very reason the president has no alternative but to stick to this particular.
Mr. De Silva, when you said the president has no alternative, now there have been discussions on what should have been done or what could have been done instead of declaring a state of emergency. We have this act called the Sri Lanka Disaster Management Act, and there were senior council, members of the legal fraternity, members of parliament who were of the opinion that we should have, declared a state of disaster in the country. And the act does provide in its interpretation under Section 25 for an epidemic to be declared as a disaster. That will get the entire parliament in motion. The opposition leader, the president, the prime minister, all of them will be a part of the committee. They can draft regulations. In your capacity as the advisor of an advisor of the Ministry of Justice. Was this option considered before emergency regulations were enacted?
No, we can't wait till we appoint that or we are going to implement that, because this is an emergency situation.
Mr. De Silva,
but I quite appreciate that already. You must remember this, already there's an enactment coming in, COVID situation enactment, where they are giving powers to the parliament, where the committee is going to implement, and then they are going to work on that. So that is why I'm saying this is not the correct situation, where I quite appreciate the laws should be there. And then, and I can remember Mr. Sumantranan in this particular forum has stated, why are you not coming out with emergency regulation? There are enough ways of doing this by having the emergency regulation to curtail the COVID situation. That is why I say, at that point, government was not going to decide. They never decided to have the emergency regulation. They waited. They were looking after the 18,
No, that is wrong. That is wrong, Mr. Ismail, because they waited because they want to declare an election at that time. This was, no, this, no, Mr. Diswal.
But subsequently, subsequently you should have done
that's not right, no, Mr. Diswal. You are trying to draw a parallel to that.
No, no.
That was because the government wanted to have an election. That is why they didn't declare a state of emergency at that time.
Subsequently, what happened?
Subsequent. That's a different story.
So,
but don't draw a parallel to what Mrs. Mandiran said back at that time. I remember what he said. We came on the show and said. You were also there, Mr.
Bhavani,
I told that this particular act is quite enough for us to go ahead. But if you correctly point out, now if the President wants to have this emergency regulation, at that point he should have done it. He never did it.
He didn't do it because there was an election.
No, after the election. Now,
after the election, Mr. Diswal, there was no point.
How many months
had
we have passed?
6.9 million people voting for them.
Sorry?
There were 6.9 million people who voted for them. There was no need to have another.
And that is why thereafter COVID situation was there right through. So why should the President did not implement that particular emergency regulation at that point after the election? After the election.
There was no need.
That's right. The need is this.
This is an emergency.
This is emergency.
This is the emergency, actually.
On what basis we are going to have the distribution of...
if
now,
people start hoarding
I
goods,
don't know whether she is having any other authority or any other things to say with regard to these sections. But with regard to these sections, they don't give power to the minister or to other people, to Consumer Affairs Authority, to distribute these things. So we are
Mr. Disela, that's what I'm actually going to ask about. Now, we understand that a Commissioner General has been appointed, and we know that the Consumer Affairs Authority and even to the IGP himself, the new Commissioner General has issued certain directives, instructions, or I don't know whether we can call them orders even. In that sense, where does this Commissioner General stand in terms of the hierarchy of how the governance works? Like, where is he? Is he like on par with, like, right below the President, or where does he stand?
So I think it can be clearly said everyone's below the President. So we have an executive President, and now we have a very heavy, very powerful executive President who has appointed a Commissioner General under the declaration of emergency, under the PSO. So I would say, and hopefully my colleagues agree, we have one individual who's all powerful in terms of essential services and goods. That's the Commissioner General for Essential Services. Now, that individual can appoint others, can appoint competent authority. That's all provided in the emergency regulation. But I think we miss one point here. We are talking about institutions that have been, quite rightly said, been there for quite some time. Now, if we knew those institutions lacked the particular powers that are required, those amendments should have been brought. Now to say we don't have the powers, we can't act, that's not our job, that's a failure within an institution. Again, to say, oh, that doesn't have the power, so we go to emergency, that's normalizing something that should be an exceptional situation. Now, everyone says this is an exceptional situation, but can we look to why we are in this exceptional situation? For over a year, we've had a pandemic. We've had experts, we have task forces, we have centers, we have so many entities. I think Sri Lanka, in that sense, has the best systems because we have so many experts, so many task forces. Now, And we had elections, we had so much rhetoric saying we are going to do the best, all of that. We have the Disaster Management Act, so we
Because
have
the
laws.
last time something like this happened, it was a tsunami, and that was a disaster indeed, like in
Exactly.
essence.
So, in a sense, unfortunately, Sri Lanka also has the experience of a war, of tsunami. We've had emergencies. Now, this is a pandemic. Definitely, it's a different situation.
But this was here for a while.
But exactly. So we have institutions, we have laws. Now, today what happened in Parliament was when you saw some in opposition, some in government saying, why can't we use emergency? Because you used emergency. I don't think that's the way we should approach emergency.
But, Bhavani, if I may ask you this question. Now, you are clearly articulating about what happened during the last 1.5 years. When the Yahapalne government was making mistakes, where was the CPA?
We actually, when the Yahapalne government brought in emergency regulations, because you're asking, we were the only ones challenging those emergency regulations. Because I'll be very clear, I don't think emergency regulations should be treated as the norm. And that's what we've clearly said. When we have laws, when we have systems in place, when we have structures in place, use those.
So when
Have
was
a
the
due
last time
process.
such a regulation was brought forward? This was right after the
2019.
Easter Sunday attacks,
Yes.
if I recollect right. At that time, did the CPA
We challenged it in the Supreme Court, Shamir. We challenged it. We were the only ones who went to court because I think at that time people didn't want to be seen as challenging. We said there are problems in these emergency regulations. They're broad, they can lead to discrimination. This whole concept of using emergency as a go-to, I think is a very, very scary prospect in a democracy. Because we have an executive president, we have a parliament, 225 members sitting in parliament who should have the role of lawmaking.
So, Bhavani, let's say the people appoint a respective government into play, into action. When the people or when organizations like your organization, like civil rights movements, says it is not right, let's go and challenge it in courts. What is the redress you all get as a result of that? Because at the redress you all get as a result of that. At the end of the day, the government has a clear majority in parliament. They will go ahead and pass the amendment in question, like in the case of today. 132 members voted in favor, only 51 members went against the bill.
But Shamir, that's part of democracy, that we can have different positions, we can argue, we can debate, we can challenge. It goes to parliament, there is a space in parliament to also have those debates. Now, throughout history, that has been there. That's very important in a democracy, that you have separation of powers, the executive does his or her role, parliament does his or her role. What emergency does, and I think this is something we missed at the very beginning, emergency powers gives a lot of powers to one individual. So one individual now in a state of emergency can decide to issue any regulation. Now today we are talking about essential services and supplies. Tomorrow if there's a new regulation, we may have to have a different conversation.
But this public security ordinance covers these two areas. Now,
exactly.
Constitutionally, there is no problem for the government to bring in such a regulation.
Exactly. So,
if they have a clear majority in parliament, then that can be enacted as a law. There is no problem. So why is organizations like Bhavani Fonseca's organization, CPA, is opposing such a law?
I think that's called democracy. No, Shamir, that we can actually question, we can critique, we can challenge. We don't have to face repercussions.
But if there's a constitutionality, in that provision that is being brought forward, what is the point of challenging it?
So
what is the redress you all get as
exactly.
a result?
No, Shamir, emergency regulations have been there for decades. They have also been successfully challenged. There's jurisprudence from the Supreme Court that has struck down emergency. So that's why it's very important to challenge it.
Give me an example, Bhavani.
For example, Joseph Pereira's case. Mark Fernando established clear guidelines, benchmarks in terms of when freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, all of those can be curtailed. Emergency alone cannot take away certain rights. Just because one says it's emergency, you don't have that all-powerful might to go and just stop things. So the Supreme Court has actually struck down certain provisions at certain points. That's why the right to challenge has to be there. That said, that's why it's very important. You have the executive, you have the legislature, you have the judiciary. All three have to work. When one arm is all powerful, that's very concerning in a democracy. Now, my colleague say it's an exception.
Yeah, let's get into the nuts and bolts of this particular emergency regulations in question, will you, Bhavani? Now, what is a scheme for the management of food supplies given this regulation has now come into force? What's going to happen next?
Well, I won't know what will happen next because I can't foresee the future. But the emergency regulations provides a scheme. There is a Commissioner General for Essential Services who is a former military person. Now, one can debate, why do you have a former military person? Why do you not have a civilian?
But Tushar says he's a civilian.
Well, that we can debate. In the past, we have had Commissioner Generals of Essential Services. That's an institution we've had before. With the tsunami, we had one. During the war, we had one. These have been civilian administrators with expertise to coordinate. Now, if you look at the emergency regulations, that task, was there no one else for that position within the civil administration? Why appoint a former military person?
Now, pause there for a second.
One more point. Now, we also have, I think, Kushan's boss, chairman, who's also a former military person. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have task forces with former and serving military officials. Now, some may say, well, why not? My question is why? Because we do have civilians who have the experience.
Ms. De Silva, good question now. The GMOA was one of the organizations that opposed the military being given the vaccination drive. Right now, ultimately, a retired military person has been given the task to carry out the most essential service right now in Sri Lanka. That is a big question mark.
So that's working, right?
Now, whether he is doing his job properly or not, merely because
It's being done.
he is an army personnel, why may they are coming out with this army personnel, former personnel like that? If he is not doing that, and if he is not going to adhere to the country's laws, then of course we can point out and say you are doing wrong thing and government is not doing a proper job.
We can't discriminate army personnel.
You can't discriminate. It is the power of the president. President can't call the opposition leader and ask whether will I appoint this person, or he can't call Bhavani and ask whether will it be possible to appoint another person. I'm not saying anything. We can't expect that. He won't call me and ask that, because
But
he
Mr.
can
Disilla,
get advice. That's a different matter. But the fact remains, merely because he is appointing somebody, former personnel of army, they say that is wrong. How can you say like that?
We can't be discriminating
That's right.
our
How
forces.
can you do that?
Come on.
If he's doing the wrong thing, then of course we are also in favor of
I have a question from one of our viewers. Doesn't it demoralize public servants when their responsibilities are removed from them and repositioned with them with a military engagement? Doesn't that defeat the fundamental?
No, now currently, Consumer Affairs Authority chairman is also Major General. So now there is another Major General on top of him. So then it's no one has taken his. These are two military persons.
I think, Tushar, maybe the dilemma among the
they are civilians now.
No, but can I...
Now they are civilians.
It's a
But Mr. Disilla,
fundamental question here. Since March 2020, since the pandemic started, we've had several military, former military, playing a key role in institutions, from task forces to the National Center to positions in various ministries, now the Commissioner General. Now, You may say there's no problem, let them do the task. But for over a year, we've had these individuals
Yes.
play a role.
What happened?
And we are now in an emergency. We are in a state of an exception.
That is
So
correct,
have
no,
they
Tusha.
done their
But
task?
it's not
Emergency-
merely because the
we
army personnel is
No,
there.
but then if
Exactly.
they work,
we are facing a pandemic for the first time, right? This is the first time.
yeah, but
that
then
we are facing something
what
like
you're- what we go back to that first question now. If institutions like your institution exist, good. If there's a major general
So
appointed there,
let me also say, now there are a lot of economists, professionals who've been running the country for up until 2019, let's say.
then maybe the president should remove the finance minister and appoint a military person there
We have
also.
not, right? We have not.
Tuja,
We are
I
in
don't
the
believe
same-
professionals ran our country. Politicians make decisions on behalf of the
No,
country.
no, I'm not referring to the politicians. I'm specifically referring to some retired military personnel.
Can I ask you a
called
question,
into.
Tusha? Now, the Vietnam individuals are comprising the cabinet at the moment, no?
Yeah.
Are all these individuals acting professionally?
No, this is why I'm saying.
That's what I'm also saying.
So
That's what
this
we are
is
also trying to say. That's what
this is
Sasuranga's
the-
point is. Professionals have been appointed in the guise of organizations like Vietnam and all that. But are these really professionals who are running the country?
I'm
Like you're
quite
saying,
not
No,
sure.
if you're pointing the finger at the economy to the argument to that is, then like for everything else, if the CA is working perfectly fine with the major general, if the health ministry is working with the military individual, if the task forces are working, then might as well take the economists also out and put military men there.
See, what I'm trying to tell you is, up until 2019, let's assume that there was no military involvement in the government, like the present day.
What happened?
So till 2019, this country was like this. There was no difference.
That's right.
Professionals ran this country. Why are we only blaming the military for 1 year of work? Not fair.
Mainly because they are military people or not, is that I told you that the government service is not doing their job. Attitudes should be changed. They should come out with a proper mechanism. They are not coming out with it. They have the bureaucracy. So then they say that we want what we want. We are not going to adhere to the present situation. We are going the same way.
But then,
Yeah.
Mr. De Silva, you're talking as if Sri Lanka is the only country in the world. The international community is looking at us. There is UNHRC and all of that happening. And we say militarize the entire country because the government servants are not
we
There
are
is
not
no
saying anything.
militarization.
How
Why are we
are
talking
you going to say that?
You said
Militarization,
this,
your
Mr.
word.
Silva.
This is
No,
not
you
the word
said
used by
appointing
the
the government is
military
not
person.
military.
No,
No, no, no.
a former military person.
retired
So don't
military
do that.
person.
Don't come out with that because
Don't discriminate them.
Don't
No.
discriminate and don't come out with the opposition parties'
Mr. De Silva.
position.
Mr. De
And
Silva.
then the foreign countries say various things. We are not bothered about that.
No.
If we are doing a proper job, then we will stick to our way of doing
Mr. De
things.
Silva,
Otherwise,
Mr. De
we
Silva,
can't adhere to
Mr. De
their
Silva,
problem.
if this government was run by a civilian president,
Yeah.
the president is a civilian at the moment, no question about that. If he did not have any military engagement before, your argument can be brought forward that henceforth military personnel have been appointed, hence nothing to be done. But this is a president who was serving in the military before, and his track record with regard to his tenure as the Minister of Defence brings in a lot of question marks to a lot of people. You want me to name
Take
it?
all the
Could
US
prove, no.
presidents, they
Lot
are
of-
all ex-military.
Lot of allegations were there, but unfortunately, what happened?
Nothing was proven.
made
That is a different story.
Unnecessary allegation, but they couldn't go to courts and prove it. If they have proved that, then I will also say that is correct. All these matters, of course, each and every person in this government or the former government, they have problems, they have allegation. But if they are not going to prove that, then we can't say they have allegation. Don't do that. It is very sad situation. If that person is doing some work with the people whom he can have the confidence, let him do it and see whether they are doing. Before they do it, you are coming out with various things. Now,
But after that, Mr. De Silva, 2 years after down the line, you might come and say, guess what happened? He did his job, he probably failed or he won the situation. And then you might start blaming the respective government in play.
no, now we have to allow them to do something, no, because now if the emergency regulations are there, it is only for 1 month. Now thereafter, we have to go before again to the parliament. to extend it. So till such time, why are we worried?
But that's not a problem, no, Mr. De Silva. They have the majority, so they can keep on going for.
that's
No, what I'm
democracy,
saying
right?
is, your argument will suffice if the government is going to do unnecessary things, suppressing, my learned friend said, suppressing the various acts which Constitution is recognized. Then, of course, we can say they are doing a wrong thing.
Will
We are a
will the
functioning democracy, right?
Commissioner General of Essential Services,
Yes.
knowing that it is the former president's brother who's handling or manipulating the Sri Lankan rice market, along with the strongman of the SLFP, will he go and question these individuals?
We'll wait and see. Tomorrow onwards, the regulations are in force, and the Gazette notification will be published, and the regulations will be published, and it will be there. So we'll wait and see whether he is coming out with it, or if that person is giving the paddy or the necessary goods to the people to be distributed.
So there is a plan. There is a plan.
That's right.
The plan is
Wait
to
and
enforce
see.
the regulation and
Wait
get the
and
paddy.
see, because the confiscation will not come into place, as my learned friend said. It is where the government is going to distribute, because there is no such mechanism to do that. If there is, tell me, anybody. Now, I was listening, I was watching the debate. They are not coming out with the mechanism. They are stating the various acts which does not provide. Those acts do not provide any clause where they can go and distribute these things. Where they can do it, they can arrest or they can take into custody, and thereafter they have to file the cases. Filing cases, of course, we know what will happen. They go and plead not guilty. Then once the court is found guilty, they appeal the case. So what is happening to the goods? So will the people get the benefit? No, they won't get. So any mechanism or any law where, apart from this law, if you can show, I will say yes, I'll adhere, and I will say I will withdraw all my argument.
Tushan, then we have to ask the flip side of the same question. Then I'm going to go against what I asked Bhavani earlier, and I'm going to ask you this question: if the solving of this problem was this easy, if it was just to put an emergency regulation in place, why do it now and not do 3-4 weeks earlier? Is it because
why
the government...
3-4 weeks earlier? We could have done it
because we had the gas crisis, the rice crisis, the sugar crisis, and the milk powder crisis at the same time.
The government could have brought in the emergency regulations 6 months earlier.
Why didn't that happen?
Because we are coming into a crunch point. We have a serious economic problem right now in the country.
And they have various discussions also.
Let's face that.
But
we have to face
Tushan,
reality.
if we are to wait and see, like what Mr. De Silva suggests, the situation is so bad, can we actually wait and see until you do all the test runs and see if we can go forward with this or not?
That's why there is no test run this time. It's an emergency. They'll seize the goods, distribute it through
immediately.
Mr. De Silva.
If we are to go to the court process, it's going to take time because courts are not functioning.
So we have a question. We have a question, Tushan, from one of our viewers, who's a very ardent fan of Face the Nation. So his question to you is: if the military personnel or the retired military people are running this country at the moment through emergency regulations, does that mean that the president does not trust his cabinet and the state ministers?
That's a question to the president, not to me. Unfortunately, I can't.
So people can say various things, but if they are coming out with certain areas where they have gone wrong, they have failed or not is a different matter. Everybody says like that. But if they have done any corrupted work...
So I just want to ask Dr. Yasantha a question, because he's been silent for some time. Dr. Yasantha, now you've been hearing this debate, arguments for and against the bill in question. And you also heard the views expressed by Tushan, who's directly affiliated to the government ranks at the moment. What are your thoughts as a layman when you hear these speeches? Bhavani is of the opinion that why the military has been running the country since 2020 April, nothing concrete has taken place. Mr. De Silva and Tushan are of the opinion that why not the military? They are civilians now, so why not the military run the country at the moment? There shouldn't be discrimination. What are your thoughts?
Now, as a layman.
Yeah, as a layman.
Right. I see that the politicians are trying to let down, or that some of the professionals, to show that they are not doing their job and they are a failure. For example, now this time the government, we call Vietmaga, right? Now they have brought the Vietmaga into operation to show that the government is backed by the educated crowd. Now they are not doing anything. Then in front of the public, they have been discredited. In that manner, maybe some of the civilians would be discredited and show off. Maybe the military person would be the capable people. With that direction, I think that it's because now if you take the vaccine rollout, GMO saying that I also victim of getting the vaccine. I was in the queue for many times. Then the vaccine was not enough. But for the military, we say that it's continuously doing. That's the one of the argument they are coming. That is to discriminate or discredit the GMO or the government officials.
Not that the GMO will do a better job, Dr. Yasanthi, with regard to
No, I am not telling they are doing good job, but as a layman, what I say, there may be agenda in future to bring some sort of figures into the political table.
Dr. Yasanthi, if I could just add one more question now. The general public are always of this opinion, as in generally what the people are made to feel is that prices are actually really high. And because of that, the government intervenes and brings down these prices a lot, when that is actually not the real case. It's that certain companies are maintaining a monopoly in the country and are artificially inflating a lot of these prices. For example, even recently, the issue surrounding the oximeters. The cap for the oximeters was set at 3,000 rupees. When I found oximeters that are being sold at a price of 1,400 rupees. And when I spoke to this deal, I was like, well, at least now they've introduced a cap. He was like, what's the meaning of this cap? It's twice as much the amount as I'm selling an oximeter right now. So the people are always of this opinion that we are getting this at a very cheap price. The government is putting in an extra bit of money from the government treasury, but that's not really the case. So when it comes to issues like this, the core issue or the problem is that there are certain companies in Sri Lanka operating a monopoly. And many countries in the world have anti-monopoly laws to prevent such a situation. Now, we saw President's Council Luar de Silva and also Tushan agreeing that we don't have anti-monopoly laws in Sri Lanka. We have many legal luminaries, many professionals, economists. Can't our professionals in our country come up with some anti-monopoly laws that then can be enacted into law, maybe even in a few days, like the Port City Act was passed?
Yes, I totally agree with you. Now, with more respect, I would say that economists, because I don't know whether I misunderstand, economists are not doing something for the good of the economy. Now, if you take the economy, now I take one example. When I was in Korea for my higher studies, I met one of the guy on the road. Actually, they can't speak in English, but we had a chat. What he was, I said that I am from. He asked actually where are you from? I said I am from Sri Lanka. He said that he has been for some time in Sri Lanka. Then he was appreciating the country situation, because without doing anything we can eat something. That means our land are more fertile, then we can eat something, right? But in Korea, if you are not work hard, you can't eat anything. So in the same manner, without doing anything, the politicians, they can run the economy. But to reach to a take a takeoff, right? The economic takeoff, we need more. As you mentioned, the Monopoly Act. Now, in Sri Lanka, actually, what I actually all the time I am telling that the East Asian miracle is not, it didn't come, without having institutional framework, which was empowered, enhanced by the law and regulation, right? It's very strong. Even if you take the US, they have anti-competitive law. Then they are monitoring what are the emerging situation in US economy, and see based on the market share and what we call that Herfendel-Hirschman index, one of the criteria, to see how the monopoly developments are happening. Now, if you take the rice market, it's a oligopoly market where the collusions are happening. Now, for example, one of the newspaper reported recently, yesterday or today, now there will be a shortage of rice. Why they are discussing? That's that's a collusion to have a shortage in the market. With that, they want to increase the price, right? So, in Sri Lanka, we have to have a proper legal system to monitor. It's an institutional.
Dr. Asantha, is there a food crisis in Sri Lanka at the moment?
Actually, as I mentioned, in Sri Lanka, we never go through, food crisis.
We've had food crisis in 1970 to 1973.
When?
Sirma Bandaranaike's era.
It's not a food crisis, right? People had something. If you go to the, African countries, that's the food crisis. People can eat something, right, and survive. If the people can't eat and die, the people, it would be a
we have an economic crisis.
Right? So,
but Dr. Yasantha, the main reason why these prices are rising, isn't it because of the money that has been printed like this? Because just a couple of days ago, 40 billion rupees was printed.
That's
now,
right?
Economic
and
crisis.
so can't we address that instead of going into a drastic measure like this?
Now, if we are to address the economic issue, we have to coming out from the red list. That's the pandemic situation. Wherever now we are getting less of foreign currency, because of that every crisis has happened. Then what you mentioned was that money printing. Money printing, it's not necessarily take place the inflation. If the supply goes up, then it's come to a balance. If the supply is enough, because usually what happen, small large number of quantity of money pursued the small number of quantity, then price goes up. If the supply comes, then it will come to, okay, give me 1 minute, it will be normalized. But in Sri Lanka, the supply is not increasing. So therefore, definitely the price will increase.
Right. So I just want to touch on what I asked Dr. Asantha. Is there a food crisis in Sri Lanka at the moment? Yes or no?
I don't think so.
So why is that an emergency regulation has been imposed if there is no issue with the food?
There is an economic crisis. We need money to buy. We need to.
So all this is a farce now. For the maintenance of supplies and services of essential to the life of the community based on the Public Security Ordinance, Section 2 of the Public Security Ordinance, is all nonsense.
No, see, look at it from the current context.
Yeah.
It is an emergency, right? So
the emergency is the economic crisis.
No, because see, for the courts to function, they can't do their normal function.
Yeah,
right?
because this ordinance, based on what Bhavani said, has been imposed. Reasons are in the interest of public security and the preservation of public order. Point number one. Point number two is for the maintenance of supplies and services essential to the life of the community. That's point number two. Right. So if there is no food crisis, then the second point is not valid.
No. Why you are interpreting?
There's a distribution crisis. There's a
distributing
crisis.
We have
that's what I'm asking. Is it an economic crisis or is it
it's related to a food crisis?
Because it is food crisis, right?
Food has to be distributed.
You can't use that word, food crisis, because the people bringing down these stuffs are keeping that, and that they are not
Hoarding it.
distributing.
Right, let's say there is no food crisis.
No,
And, there is no food crisis, right?
Enough food is available.
Enough food is available.
That's-
Why did the government decide to impose 6,000 metric tons of rice?
Sorry?
Why did the government decide to impose 6,000 metric tons of rice if there is no food shortage in the country?
No, it's not because of that. It is to stabilize the prices.
That's right.
That's demand and supply
If the
at play.
government, now, what I'm saying is government should come forward and then they should break
Stabilize.
down the stuff. Otherwise, the monopoly is there. So if they are going to
Mr.
do
De Silva,
that,
look at
then
the illogical thinking of this government, will you,
Why?
Mr. De Silva?
Why? What is the illogical?
Now they say that they want to impose, they want to have a country devoid of chemical fertilizer.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
So the 6,000 metric tons of rice that is being brought from whichever country to Sri Lanka is organic. Is organic rice.
Say-
Connection.
You are
What are we trying to
No,
establish?
no, I'm trying to establish the illogical thinking of the government.
To say like that, because at this stage we can't ask the people to suffer merely because the government has taken a good policy decision. So we have to come out with that.
What is the point
result
of taking
later.
such a policy decision if it's not going to be implemented?
No, we are implementing it, and the results will come in future. So we have to wait and see.
But this has
But
been
till
imposed
such
from
time-
this season, from this cultivating season.
That's what I'm telling you.
This is not the future. This is right now. This is happening
we have
right
not
now.
given them
The government
all
is
the
trying to
necessary
put the
harmony
people into an abyss
fertilizer.
through its illogical thinking.
No, that is.
This is not what I'm saying.
not-
This is what the opposition
without
is.
having a crisis, they are bringing that to stabilize. That is why we are saying that we will wait and see, because it will be given to people, and then they will wait for the other season. Then the crops will be there. So then thereafter we can say we have used this organic fertilizer. That is how we are going ahead.
Mr. De Silva,
Otherwise,
now
merely
today
because
we are
you say
we
that-
are in September, Mr. De
Sorry?
Silva. Today we are in September.
That's right.
I will call you again, Mr. De Silva, end of December.
Very good.
You know
And
why,
then
Mr. De Silva? Then
before
I
that
want to
also I'm
analyze
ready.
the way
If
in which
if
how
the
this government has their forward march in terms of bringing forth organic fertilizer to Sri Lanka.
Certainly, I am ready to come. And then before that also, I am ready to come, because if the government is continuing with these emergency regulations, apart from distributing,
There is
then I
a
will be
good
here.
possibility, Mr. De Silva, that Azra might call you for the show. You know why? Because no one from the government is coming.
No.
Right?
I am ready to come.
Yeah,
because
you are
I
ready to
will
come. Thank you
accept
very much.
it. I
We
will
salute
accept
you.
and
Representing
say
the
it's
government.
wrong.
Yeah.
We'll say.
No, no.
Representing the
That's right. So, no, because we are predicting.
So, right.
And
Yeah.
even
So,
the
but I
opposition,
just- Mr. De Silva, yeah.
even the
Let me-
opposition,
let
they are
me-
not coming out with
Mr.
a
De Silva,
solution.
Yeah, Ms. De Silva, yeah, Bhavani, you want to say something? You want to say something?
No, I mean, look, we keep coming back to this exceptional situation. Now, and this is a point Kushan actually raised. He said 6 months ago, emergency should have been in place.
I just said it could have been done.
Could have been, yes, semantics here. But so a few months ago, the government had a sense we were heading towards a dire situation. Call it whatever, emergency, exceptional, whatever. So 6 months ago, they could have actually brought in new laws.
Can't.
Quite correct.
No.
100%
So,
correct.
yes,
It
thank
takes
you,
a
Mr.
long
De Silva.
time
Thank you.
to
No,
amend
so
the Consumer Affairs
several
Authority Act.
months ago, laws could have been brought in. Port City passed in a matter of weeks. So if there's real political will to address the emergency, they could have done it. They didn't. They could have brought in the amendments required for your institution.
They did it.
They have done it.
They
They have done it now.
No,
No,
not now.
We started early 2020 to
So,
amend.
okay,
it
early
takes a long
2020.
time.
Constitution.
Mind you, we have to get everyone's opinion,
That's
and
right,
then
yeah.
it has
For
to
the
go
first
to the
time,
legal
Kushan,
draftsman.
first time the government wants to get everyone's opinion, because for the
No,
Port City
no,
bill,
no.
they didn't
It's
want
not
to
the
get everyone's
government.
opinion.
It has to go to the legal draftsman.
And
all this, there's a
it is
process.
not
I mean,
It takes a long
definitely.
It's not
time.
easy.
I will recognize there is a lawmaking process,
Yeah.
and I am so glad that you're saying that process works.
Already,
Excellent,
yes.
excellent, very good point. So, since early 2020, you've been trying to bring these amendments. But in 2020, you also had a constitutional amendment passed very quickly. In 2021, you had the Port City bill passed very quickly. They also, I assume, went through those processes, but this got stuck. So this wasn't seen as priority.
Maybe it was not in the priority list.
No, so I mean, I'm just relying on what you're saying.
You are right.
So priority-wise for the government, though they recognize there was a need to amend, they didn't do it. Instead, they brought in task forces. They brought in a national center. Now, yes, pandemic, we needed institutions, but this could have also been done. It didn't happen. Now we've got to a crunch point, and suddenly it's emergency. Suddenly it's like, oh, we need to do this because the president has the power. It has been done before. Let me just finish here. Now, the Consumer Affairs Authority has been there for decades. Yes, could have done so many things. Successive governments could have done it. We can blame the different governments. But we're talking about a government that promised so much, and is now unraveling. That's my opinion. Now, in June this year, there were gazettes issued by the Consumer Affairs Authority saying, declare stocks of rice, of sugar. I think there were 3 gazettes.
Yeah.
There could be more. I only know of 3.
Much more, yes.
Yeah.
I believe it's over-regulation.
Yes, okay, so that's your point. But my point is, steps were taken in June to at least create an inventory of the stocks.
Yeah.
So then in June, you were aware there were certain stocks in place. Now, last week, what happened was with emergency, even those who went through that scheme overnight found out that emergency now creates a new scheme. So now the Consumer Affairs Authority that set in place, bona fide or whatever, I don't know, you're the person who's in charge of that, you have a system in place. Now emergency is brought in, and it's a new scheme, there's a Commissioner General. So the question is, isn't there also arbitrariness here? Those who engage with your process and thought, okay, that's the way you do it, are now wondering, well, overnight it changed, and what's the confidence that gives?
Okay, to answer your question, we only told them to register. But if they are holding stocks above their capacity, there is a problem there.
So are you saying everyone who went through that process is not affected?
No, some are affected. Why? Because they have kept stocks without proper documentation. So they can't actually give a breakdown of how they are going to distribute this. They couldn't. So
wait,
again,
last week or whatever the media has reported, where stocks were, I mean, at least in the public domain, we saw officials seeing stocks. Those were seized, is it? By the
Some were seized.
Yeah. So it's a question for even investors. What's the confidence they get when you have those systems happening?
Again, I'm with you on this. I'm telling you, it is very bad for the investors because this is over-regulation. I accept that. But we have come to a point, if people are hoarding, if traders are hoarding and creating an artificial
supply demand.
Monopoly.
Scarcity of certain essentials, I think it's time that there is nothing that can be done by us. So it is time that the Essential Services Commissioner General can seize the stock and distribute it.
But are we not getting back to this position where when there's an opportunity to create laws and strengthen institutions like yours? Now, see, we revert back to emergency as this, we have that, let's go back to it. But why are we not thinking about sustaining institutions like yours? Now, you said there's an amendment that's been there for more than a year.
I fully agree with you on that.
So what's the problem?
It's not us.
The problem is that
the lawmakers should be doing
at
that.
the moment.
So exactly.
So respective governments, respective governments, if this is the case, Mr. Silva, if this is the case, if Tushan is also in agreement that there has to be an essential commissioner general to look into the crisis that is plaguing the country at the moment.
This is a very special situation.
Yes, right.
We have not had this exceptional situation like this in the country for the last 150 years.
Isn't this because there are people in the government ranks who are close to the government who's trying to make a buck and the government is trying to support them?
Quite possible.
What is it?
That may be
Quite
possible.
possible.
That may be
Quite
possible.
possible.
Now you're saying the government is trying to make other people rich.
I am not.
You just said, Mr. De Silva.
What I am saying is a present situation. We have to see the reality.
So that's my question was very clear, Mr. De Silva. Mr. De Silva, my question was very clear. I said, does this mean there are individuals in the government who are trying to support individuals who probably have supported them during campaigning, during elections? It seems like that. When you look at the sugar scam, look at the way...
That is politics. That is politics.
It's not only the government, it's also opposition as well.
Previous governments also, same thing. But we have
That is why this government was appointed, Mr. De Silva.
Every time we say that.
You have to be reality for that, because you have to face for the reality. Now, each government has their own people, but at this stage, that government is not going to cover them up. So that is why they call the people merchants, and then they have a debate.
Let's start questioning Mr. De Silva, then the former president's brother. Let's start questioning this strongman of the SLFP.
Now wait and see whether this Commissioner General will go and have a dialogue with him and get the stuff back.
Don't you think, Tushan, don't you think the problem here is not the economic crisis, is not the food shortage? It's the government's inability to think on their feet and take proactive actions. Isn't that the problem?
It's a combination of all of this.
All of them. That's correct. Yes. That is why they have.
So does that mean? Does that mean the government has failed?
No, you can't only say the government has failed, because this is, if you take the entire situation, the economy is failing. We know that, right? We know that, right? We are well aware of that.
Tushan, I want to go back to one of these press conferences that they had in Battaramulla, the SLPP headquarters, under the patronage of former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, Udaya Gammampila, Bimal Weerawansa and several others. Interesting thoughts, you know, when they were asked about the depreciation of the rupee at that time,
Long time back, right?
Excuse me?
This was
some time back. This was during the previous government.
Yeah.
They said, if our government is in power, we will know how to manage it. This is not rocket science for us. Right? So this is what Bimal Weerawansa, who was a strongman of the now government at that time, who said so. Now you are saying it is not the government that has failed. The system itself has failed.
No. Hold on. No, you are not. See, at that time, they never calculated the COVID pandemic.
That's right. Yeah, they never.
This is a completely different thing right now. You got to understand. Be the opposition, we have
now
to face
everything
this.
has been put down on the pandemic.
When I see economic pundits from both sides, right, blaming each other in this situation without actually addressing the problem. We need to face this as Sri Lankans. Yeah. There is a huge problem.
Don't put this on Sri Lankans, don't put this on Sri Lankans, Tushan. You know why? Because Sri Lankans are not responsible for this, for respective governments who are trying to make money.
No,
look at politicians in Sri Lanka.
Your questions are always, you don't consider the COVID pandemic right now.
Problem
that has created a huge problem in the country.
Tushan,
irrespective of what we talk,
it's very well understood. There is a pandemic not only in Sri Lanka, the world over. That is why it's called a pandemic. When this goes beyond boundaries of several countries or countries for that matter, we call it a pandemic. And we have very well understood that the world
itself because you said Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and Bimal Weerawansa said at one point,
at one point
that we know how to do it.
So at that time, Harsha De Silva, who was the Minister of State Economic Affairs, he said that we are facing this crisis as a result of the situation in the global scenario. And as a result of that, we are...
minus the pandemic. Right.
Minus the pandemic.
And
But
you-
right now,
you
the
believe
pandemic
that.
is in
The
there.
biggest crisis right now
you
for
believe-
any economy, the biggest
I don't
threat.
believe the government now also, Mr. De Silva.
Shamir, the
Then of
biggest
course,
threat to
Forget
any
about
country,
the
the
fact
biggest
that whether I
threat.
believed what happened
That's right.
previously.
If you haven't done
I'm very,
no
I'm
problem.
very, very critical about things.
Shamir,
Not
the
that I don't
biggest
believe.
threat to any economy anywhere in the world is currently is COVID.
So now
Let's face
Tushan has an argument, Bhavani. The current pandemic is the problem. Forget about the past, forget about whatever happened in the past, is in the past. But now we are facing a global crisis, and this has happened after 102 years. The last time we faced a pandemic was in the Spanish flu in 1918. Now we are in 2021. We started facing the pandemic 102 years after. So now this is a concern. So the government can't be held responsible to what has happened because of the pandemic.
So who do you then hold responsible?
Tushan?
I mean,
Well,
it's an
of
elected
course,
government.
everyone is responsible for it.
No.
Government.
That's easy to say, Tushan. You can
yeah.
also say elected people.
Why
But
only
can
the
I-
government?
Government has the responsibility. You can't say government is responsibility
Ability
to
of the government.
do the best for the people.
The best thing is, if that is the case, Mr. De Silva, the best thing is to let the opposition run the country.
Why?
Oh,
That's why I'm telling you, they have taken the responsibility into their hand, and that's why they have given this opportunity to the people by imposing this emergency regulation. So you are concerned about that. But
I am
saying
concerned
is-
about that because of the people of this country.
No,
That is why I'm
no,
concerned
nothing will happen. People will get the benefit because you wait and see for 1 month and see. My learned friend quite correctly stated why you all have not brought this. I quite appreciate that. I also know what actually happened. Now,
Mr. De
this-
Silva, the problem
no, wait,
is
wait,
this to
wait,
Mr.
let
In
me say-
2019 April, when the government should have brought in the emergency regulations prior to the elections. They didn't do so, no?
Thereafter
That is
also
because
they didn't do.
that is because they had a political agenda
that
at
is
that
your
time.
point of view,
But
no.
no,
But
that is not
subsequently
my
they
point
should
of view.
have
That is
done
the
it, no.
truth. Those are facts.
No, that is not
Those
the
are
fact.
facts. Now you
Because
itself
if
quipped
they wanted
what
to do
Sumandiran
that-
said here.
Sorry?
In this very show, you said, Sumandiran said, why wasn't the emergency regulation brought at that
There
point?
is no necessity at that point. That's what I'm telling you.
But that time also we were
Thereafter
reeling with
also there is
COVID.
no necessity.
At that time also we were reeling with COVID. At that time,
That's
if we
what
have,
I'm saying.
At that time, if we would have arrested the situation, we wouldn't have faced this problem at the moment.
Shamir,
Yeah, that is not
if
correct.
we allow this to go forward just like this, there'll be a sugar crisis, and you want the traders to hoard it and keep it.
Keep it. That's what
And,
you are.
No, but under-
and
but under
exploit
regulations-
all the consumers. Is that what you expect?
Under the regulations, it's an offense to hoard food stocks.
So that is why I'm
Exactly.
telling you. I mean,
But
you
the
must
problem
understand
is
the
we
courts
can't-
are not functioning.
Courts are not functioning.
So how can we get the benefit of the court
If we
cases?
file a
So you
case, it
can't
will
do
take
that.
another 6 to 8 months.
And then
so then
thereafter,
this
what is
whole
the next
process
step?
is lost.
If they are pleading guilty only, we can do something. If they are not pleading guilty, they can have a file. They can file the petition of appeal and go to court, High Court, and thereafter the Supreme Court. So there is a procedure. So to
And
avoid
all of and everything can happen the way the government wants at the end of the day.
no, that is not the word you. That
Mr.
was
De
not
Silva, how
correct.
long does the government plan on extending
That's
these
what I'm telling
emergency
you.
regulations?
Quite correctly point
for?
out. Now it is being given only for 1 month.
Right.
So they before the end of the this month, they have to come to Parliament. President should inform what actually happened. Is there any stocks available to go into, or whether we have done it and we have distributed it, and thereafter new stocks have come or not. So those things we should wait and see.
So
And
you're
thereafter-
confident that this will be resolved in a month, that whatever that we couldn't do for this long,
That's what I'm telling you.
just because we put these regulations, that this will all be okay in a month.
Automatically, if they are not going to Parliament, automatically it will be over. So there won't be any problem. If they are going to continue, I will agree with my learned friend, because they can't do it in a haphazard way, and they can't continuously doing it using this method. So they can't do it.
Mr.
Tushar,
Are you
does the-
responsibly
does-
saying? Are you responsibly saying that they won't extend the state of emergency?
That's what I am telling you. The president has a responsibility to go before the parliament and inform what is the position. And if they say there are more things to be done, then another 1 month, that's all. Then thereafter, if they say we have done it and then we have distributed it, then there won't be any problem. Then they can't continue with this because
But
they have.
there is a possibility for it to be continued as well.
You are not talking unnecessary
it's
things.
not.
No, I am not.
These are
Mr. Nisila.
illegal.
Mr.
This
Nisila,
is
look
like-
at the past.
This is like
Mr. Nisila.
opposition coming out
Mr. Nisila.
unnecessary
Mr.
things.
Nisila, look at the past. You came on this show several months ago
Yes,
before,
yes, that's correct,
before
yeah.
Basil Rajapaksa was appointed to Parliament. You said he's not going to come.
At
There is
that
no
point,
discussion at that
he
point.
was not willing to
And
come.
after
he
that,
specifically
and after
said
that, when there were opposition MPs here say who's told you, no, he will definitely come. That is why the constitutional amendment was made. You said no.
At
Now,
that
how can we
point,
believe
I was
Mr. De Silva?
categorically stated like that because he has stated in openly that I am not interested in coming. So, is there any harm that he has changed his view and come to Parliament? Is
It's
there
a
any harm?
vibrant democracy,
Why can't
right?
he come to Parliament? You all are fear about him. If
No,
he is
we don't
not
fear.
doing-
We don't fear
No, That
anyone.
is why I am telling you, why can't he come? He is not a person in this country. Though he has this American citizenship, he is a person in this country. So
But
he
even
can have
after he
that.
came, nothing happened to Mr. De
Sorry?
Silva. There was so much noise about the fact that he was coming into Parliament. He's going to solve
You
this
wait
and that.
see for the
Wait
next
for
budget.
how long?
No, not how long? How many
For
months? he
another
is
month? How many
appointed?
more deaths then?
You can't expect miracles. No, wait and see for the budget. Now he says, I will do something for the budget. Now at this stage, COVID situation is continuing. We are going on the basis that vaccination will be done quite quickly, and then thereafter we want to open the market, and we want to ask the people to come to Sri Lanka. Tourists should come, and foreign remittances should come to Sri Lanka. Then we have to do our exports. Then only we can get the remittances. Reserves will be much more higher than that. So that is how the economic will go up. Then only we can get more benefit. The opposition is not going to do that. They are criticizing only.
You
But
talk
if
about
they are
having-
ready to show this is not the proper time to have the emergency regulation, this is what you have to do. Now, my learned friend has said that you should have acted, but unfortunately you can't do that. I am categorically stating that already they have piled up the whole what you call this particular act. The new amendment is available, but it is not completed. So without waiting this completion, the cabinet has asked the minister to have the fines increased. So that is why they are putting up
But
this.
Tushar said that's not a good idea.
Huh?
Tushar said that's not a good idea.
No, that is his opinion. I am not going to argue with that. What I am saying is what the government is thinking is that they want to increase the fines and show that it is not an easy thing. If you are doing something wrong,
Ms.
you
Disila,
have to suffer.
very quickly, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Do you think the president has confidence in his cabinet?
He has to have, otherwise he has to ask the people to go away, but not the cabinet. The people who are this is not an individual thing, Shami. You have to understand the whole system will run with the government servants.
Yeah, but if that is the case, if the president has confidence in the cabinet, why to bring in emergency regulations and get one person to reign supreme?
Again, you are asking the same.
So that is the question that is
they have
relevant.
discussed at length in the cabinet and decided. Yes,
This is a cabinet decision. No, but I didn't think this was a cabinet decision. No,
they have
because if you look at it,
you must understand.
if you look at
that
it,
they have
this is-
discussed with the
I am
cabinet.
of the opinion that it is considered expedient to
that
do
is
so
the
in order
power
to
given by the law. It is the power given by the law. It is
So this is not a
taken.
cabinet decision. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, they have
No, it's a
discussed it,
discussion.
and you must understand.
No, that is
before-
wrong. So that is wrong, Mr. Silva.
This is wrong.
Yeah.
And what
It
I'm
is
saying
wrong
is
because
not
but
wrong
you
in the sense
yeah.
what you are saying is wrong.
No,
What I'm
you said
saying
it's a
is-
cabinet decision. I said no.
Sorry?
You said it's a cabinet decision.
The cabinet decision in the sense you must listen to me.
Yeah.
The
I'm
cabinet,
listening
what
to
the
you.
cabinet was doing was that they consulted everybody and the merchants, and then they asked the traders.
I want to. No, I want to.
Cabinet
the
in
trade
sense
minister.
The
that
cabinet.
The
minister.
minister, on behalf of the cabinet, he has had the discussions with not only one minister. There are several ministers.
There
So
are
they
there are
had-
several ministers for each
Wait,
portfolio.
wait,
Let's
you
take a look
are
at health for an
allowing
example.
me to
Mr.
talk
Silva.
now.
There are four
So,
people.
Wait, those all interested ministers, they have had discussions with the merchants and then traders, and only two people agreed to reduce the amount, and the others have stated, no, we are not going to reduce the amount. The dollar rate is going up. We are not going to do that. Then what steps we can do? if they are not coming to a negotiation table, if they are not adherent to the government request, then till such time they...
Who is the minister who has requested? Is Bandulu Gunawardana or
Mr. Alagiyawan today in parliament, he has categorically stated these things.
But I'm finding it surprising is Mr. De Silva, Lasant Alagiyawan is a SLFP member.
Whether he's a SLFP or a different member.
Yeah, because he has
what I'm
more power
saying
to
is, what
press
actually
the
happened was, they were not doing it in haphazard way. They were discussing without bringing emergency regulation. They tried to solve this problem. But unfortunately, the traders were not adhering to the request. But what is the next step? Is there any other law? I'm always saying that. Is there any other law where we can have the distribution done apart from the emergency regulation? This emergency regulation have brought in because only for the distribution. Then thereafter, we
only rice, paddy and dal. Oh, sorry, only rice, paddy and sugar.
Sugar, if there are any other essentials, then they can do that.
If there are any other, they can add that to the gazette and then go ahead, as long as the Commissioner General...
As long as, Tushan, the country goes merrier and merrier and the people have, food without a crisis. That's the ultimate
That's what you want. That's what we also want.
We also want this.
That's
With its emergency
This
regulation.
time the
So
emergency
anyway, we have to go for a short
on.
commercial break, Mr. Silva. When we come back, we'll discuss more in the final round. Thank you very much. We're talking about Sri Lanka and the emergency regulations. Is it a viable alternative? All this and more in the final round. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. We will be right back.
COVID-19 සඳහා ආරක්ෂිත පියවර. ජනයා වැඩි වශයෙන් සිටින ස්ථානයන්හි ගැවසීම මගහරින්න. රෝගය ආසාදිත පුද්ගලයන් හමුවීමට නොයන්න. මුහුණ, මුඛය, නාසය සහ ඇස් ඇල්ලීමෙන් වළකින්න. අනවශ්‍ය ගමන් බිමන් යෑමෙන් වළකින්න. මුඛාවරණය ඉදිරිපස ඇල්ලීමෙන් වළකින්න.
පැන්සල් පහක මිල රුපියල් 45ක්. පැන්සල් පහක මිල 45ක් නම් පැන්සල් 20ක මිල කීයද? ඒක මොකද කරන්නේ? පහක් ගන්න තමයි රුපියල් 45ක් යන්නේ. පහේ මිටියක් ගන්න. එහෙනම් පැන්සල් 20ක් ගන්න, පහේ මිටි 4ක් ගන්න ඕනේ. 45 4ෙන් ගුණ කරන්න.
රටේ හෙට දවස වෙනුවෙන් සතියේ සෑම දිනකම උදෑසන 9 සිට.
තනිව යන්න බෑයි කියන කාරණේද අධ්‍යාපනයේදී?
මම කියන්නේ ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් සිදුවෙන දේ.
අපිට රුසියානු සපත්තුව මේ ලංකාවට දාන්න බෑ, ඒක ලොකුයි. චීන සපත්තුව සීන සමාජවාදී ඒකත් හරියන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක මේ කකුලට පොඩි. අපි අපේම සපත්තුව මහ ගන්න ඕනේ කියලා.
එක්සත් ජාතීන්ගේ මානව හිමිකම් කවුන්සිලය කියලා කියන්නේ මානව හිමිකම් පිළිබඳව ලෝක පාර්ලිමේන්තුව.
අපි පරිසරය කියන්නේ දෙකක් තිබුණා.
මේ වසංගතයත් එක්කනේ අපි මේ කතා කරන්නේ.
කොරන්ටයින් කරනකොට ආර්ථිකය වැටෙනවා. ආර්ථිකය මේ වෙනකොට කොරන්ටයින් උත්සවය.
මේවා නියාමනය කරන්නට තමයි රජයක් තියෙන්නේ.
මම ඉස්කෝලේ යන කාලෙත් මේක තුන්වන ලෝකේ රටක්. දැන් මම මැරෙන්න යන කාලෙදි තුන්වන ලෝකේ රටක්.
ආණ්ඩුව රූපාන්තරණය වෙනවා රාජ්‍ය බවට.
එත දෙක එත පහේදී තමයි මේ වතු ඔක්කොම නැෂනලයිස් කරේ.
ඔය කොමිසම් ගැන හැමතිස්සෙම එහෙම වෙන්නේ විපක්ෂ.
උපදේශනවාද රජය නොදන්නවයි කියලා මේ තත්ත්වයේ මේ අස්වැන්න අඩු වෙලා ආදායම පල්ලෙහාට බැහැලා
මුළු රටම දන්නවනේ.
Vaccines reduce the chances of infection and serious illness significantly in COVID-19. Make sure you get vaccinated, especially if you are over 60 years of age.
It's the final round right here on Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is Sri Lanka under emergency regulations. Is it a viable alternative? And we've invited the 4 guests to our studios this evening as well. And let's start off the final round with his thoughts on this subject. Dr. Yasantha Madhurapirima, Senior Lecturer, Department of Business Economics, University of Colombo. Your final thoughts on the subject.
Right now, I think that we are facing a serious crisis, which has been, economic crisis. We had been facing the economic crisis. It was looming up, and it has been triggered by this pandemic. So, as a country, now without having any political divisions, we have to come together and formulate the policies to uplift the standard living of these poor people. With regard to that, I would like to propose, I think our government also has understand, we have to come out of the red list. Then, we can bring the tourists, because one of the third major income we lost to the economy. So that's the main thing, basic and fundamental thing we have to do. So as individuals, we also have the responsibility to adhere to the quarantine or whatever the regulation. Then we can come to the green list. With that, the most of the restriction that has been placed can be shifted. With that, economic situation will be come to normal. Then that's the macro level. Then micro level, as I mentioned, we want to unfair competition in Sri Lanka. We can see the unfair competition. I will say that there are, if you take the cable companies, they overnight increase the price, every company, by same percentage. If you look at the biscuit companies, they are also doing the same way. So there are some fundamental issues without having certain laws to observe and take action against those companies. So that we have to improve the fair competition in Sri Lanka. So that is very important. Then with regard to the paddy and this rice market, we can now, if you take the Korean economy, they have large freezers in order to keep the fish when there is a over harvest. Then government purchase it. Once there is a shortage in the market, they release. The same system we have to maintain for a while. Or actually it is important, because during the Second World War, we didn't have much impact because of the cooperative societies was working properly. So distribution channel was there. So we have to maintain CWO, cooperative societies, in order to ensure the distribution of essential. So the paddy warehouses and those things has to be rebuilt and purchased and distribute to the small mill owners. So they can produce and come to the competition. Competition has to be empowered. And finally, I do not agree, I am not proposing this one to import, because that importation right now it's not the good remedy. However, if the things going in this way, we can import the rice in order to minimize the market power of oligopoly market in Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yasantha Madhurapirima. I now move my attention to Mr. U.R. De Silva, President's Counsel and Advisor to the Ministry of Justice.
Thank you very much for allowing us to enlighten the public with regard to this emergency regulations. What I am saying is, at this stage, it is the needy legislation because it is their right through. This is not a new thing. It was their right through, and then government has done their best to find out whether they can solve the problem without having this emergency regulation. They have stated everything what they did, but unfortunately they couldn't do it. Thereafter, what is the other alternative? Will the government is allowing us to do whatever they want till the Consumer Protection Authority raided these things and go to courts and get the conviction, or else the government is going to adhere to the emergency regulations and do the best for the people. So that they have done it. Now what we are expecting is if the government is going to continue unnecessarily, then my learned friend can go to Supreme Court and challenge it. Otherwise, if they are adhering to the things that they have stated in Parliament, especially the Justice Minister as well as the other ministers, they stated that this is only for temporary purpose, and it is what we want is to distribute the goods among the people. So what we are doing is that, and thereafter automatically, if they are not going to extend it, it will be it won't go ahead, and then if they are extending it for another month, they have to show what they have done and why they are asking the extension. So if the Parliament is satisfied, then they can go forward. Till such time they can do it, and then haphazardly they can't go unnecessarily prolong it, this emergency regulations. What I am saying is it is not proper to have that, and if the government is going to suppress the people's right by implement this, it is wrong. If they are adhering to the things that they have mentioned in the regulation and the gazette notification, this is quite correct, and that is the needy thing that they have done. So what we should do is we'll wait and see if the government is doing for the betterment of the people. We will say it's good. If they are not going to do that, we will say it's wrong. You are doing a wrong thing by appointing a former army personnel. He is not doing it correctly. We can say that. But now you can't say by appointing, merely because if he has been appointed, you can't say how can he say that he will do it this way or not this way. You can't do that. Let him do it, and with the assistance of the my learned friend, Consumer Protection Authority, and then if they are doing it for the benefit of the people, we will say it's good.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Yuar De Silva, President's Counsel as well as advisor to the Ministry of Justice, Attorney at Law Bhavani Fonseca, Senior Researcher, Center for Policy Alternatives.
I think this discussion has been rather enlightening, Shamir, in terms of the fact that there are many who feel emergency can be the norm. And I think this is a very, very dangerous place where we are, where any situation can be treated as an exception and emergency brought in. Now, the rationale used by the government and others is that it's been used before. So why not? My worry is when you start normalizing situations and bring in emergency because the president has that power, you create certain precedents. And that's a very worrying thing. And now my colleagues have said we can watch, we can monitor, we can challenge. Of course, we'll do all of this. But, you know, I think it's also important and incumbent on the government, who got a huge mandate on the premise that they'll do better than the previous one, that they deliver. So we've had this pandemic for several months now, over a year. What we haven't seen a coherent policy in terms of planning. You can't wake up one day and say there's an economic crisis. You saw those things happening. So, you know, what would be good is in the next month, while we are in this state of emergency, for the government to clearly come out and say, this is what we are going to be doing in this month, including lawmaking for institutions that should be having robust powers. You can't have a Commissioner General for eternity. So we've at least in this show realized there's over a year now. So will this draft finally move to Parliament, strengthen the Consumer Affairs Authority so that it has the powers without relying on a Commissioner General and emergency regulations? Plus, I think it's very important to look at other laws. It's not just the consumer aspect. We have a quarantine and prevention ordinance that goes back to 1897. Now, why is there no interest in this government to really get in a up-to-date law that addresses all these issues raised by the pandemic without running helter-skelter when there is an issue? You know, they have the 2/3. This can be done. We've seen this in the past. With the amendment, with the Port City Bill, these things can move. So, you know, emergency, while we have it for this month, keep it to this month, deliver in that month, 1 month, show the results without making further excuses.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Bhavani Fonseca. I now move my attention to Tushan Gunawardena, Executive Director, Consumer Affairs Authority.
Yeah, Shami, we need to understand we cannot, the situation right now, we cannot take out COVID from this and discuss why the economy is failing, why we are going to put the emergency. All these factors have contributed to this current status. So we are here today, we are discussing this specifically about the Essential Services Commissioner General. Is that the current situation has actually crippled some of the services in the government. Example, Consumer Affairs Authority cannot go and seal and put it to court because it won't move from there because the court is closed. So we have multiple issues revolving around this, but I think it's good that the errant traders are tackled this way at least, and the stocks taken and distributed amongst the people, and I think that's the right way forward.
Thank you very much, Tushan Gunawardena, Executive Director, Consumer Affairs Authority. Mr. U.R. De Silva, President's Counsel, Attorney at Law Bhavani Fonseca, Senior Researcher, Center for Policy Alternatives, Dr. Yasantha Madhura Peruma, Senior Lecturer, Department of Business Economics, University of Colombo. Thank you very much. Chaturanga, who's the manager for English News at MTV. Charlotte Benedict, our law student and also producer at Newsfirst, and then again manager at the English News Desk, Azra, for joining us this evening on the show. I leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do. There is a very real danger that regulations will become a wolf in sheep's clothing. Take care and good night.